My name is Miranda Thompson, and I'm 34. I once believed I had the perfect family in our beautiful Boston home. My father, David, was my hero, a brilliant cardiologist whose compassion touched everyone he met. But one day, everything shattered when my mother's betrayal led to my father's death. The shock of discovering her affair triggered his fatal heart attack. Then came the unimaginable. She married her lover just days after Dad's funeral and moved him into our family home. My sister Allison blindly took Mom's side while I stood alone honoring Dad's memory. Before I share my story, let me know where you're watching from and subscribe if you've ever felt the sting of family betrayal. This journey changed everything I thought I knew about loyalty. I grew up in Brookline, an affluent suburb just outside Boston, in a stately colonial home with a perfectly manicured lawn. From the outside, we were the ideal American family. My father, David Thompson, was a renowned cardiologist at Massachusetts General Hospital. His patients adored him, often bringing homemade baked goods to appointments or sending heartfelt cards during the holidays. Dad would proudly display these tokens of appreciation on his office wall, calling them his true credentials. My mother, Catherine, who everyone called Kate, had given up a promising career as an interior designer to raise my sister and me. She channeled her creative energy into making our home a showcase worthy of a magazine spread, hosting elegant dinner parties where Boston's elite would marvel at her impeccable taste. Mom was always perfectly put together, with not a hair out of place, even when just running errands around town. Then there was my sister Allison, 3 years my junior. From an early age, it was clear she was Mom's favorite. They shared a love for fashion, social events, and maintaining appearances. While I inherited my father's analytical mind and compassion for others, Allison absorbed our mother's focus on social status and surface perfection. Our family traditions cemented our image as the perfect American family. Sunday brunches after church where we'd discuss our week over Mom's famous blueberry pancakes. Summer vacations to Cape Cod where Dad would temporarily forget about his patients and teach us to sail. Christmas Eve parties where Mom would transform our home into a winter wonderland and Dad would play Santa for the neighborhood children. Despite his demanding schedule, Dad always made time for us. He would slip notes into my lunchbox with little medical facts that fascinated me, or attend Allison's dance recitals even after 36 hours on call. I remember him falling asleep during one of her performances, exhausted from saving a teenager who'd gone into cardiac arrest, but he had still shown up. Medicine isn't just a career, Miranda, he often told me. It's a sacred trust. People place their hearts literally and figuratively in our hands. Those words inspired me to follow in his footsteps. While Allison attended fashion design school in New York, I threw myself into pre-med studies at Boston University, eventually pursuing research in preventive cardiology. Dad couldn't have been prouder when I was accepted to a prestigious research program at Harvard Medical School. Mom maintained her social prominence through charity work, chairing the hospital gala that raised funds for cardiac care. She was known for her elegant soirees and impeccable taste. Our neighbors would often comment on how lucky we were to have such a devoted mother. "Your mother gave up so much for this family," Dad would remind us. "Her career, her independence. We owe her our gratitude." In hindsight, I wonder if he was trying to convince himself as much as us. The summer before everything fell apart, we took what would be our final family vacation to Cape Cod. Dad had seemed distracted, checking his phone more than usual. Mom spent most evenings on the deck, glass of wine in hand, also glued to her phone. At the time, I attributed their distance to normal middle-age restlessness. Dad was approaching 60, Mom in her early 50s. Maybe they were just going through a phase. One night I overheard them arguing in hushed tones on the beach. "I'm tired of making excuses, Kate," Dad said, his voice uncharacteristically stern. "The children aren't children anymore. They'll understand if you want to restart your career." "You don't understand what I need," Mom replied coldly. They noticed me approaching and immediately plastered on smiles, changing the subject to dinner plans. I should have seen it then, the growing rift between them, but I was too focused on my research and building my own life. By this point, I had established myself as a promising medical researcher specializing in genetic markers for heart disease. Dad would proudly share my published papers with his colleagues. My work kept me busy, giving me a convenient excuse to ignore the subtle changes in our family dynamic. Allison, meanwhile, had returned from New York and taken a job at a local boutique, seemingly more interested in maintaining our family's social facade than pursuing her own ambitious career. She had always been skilled at ignoring uncomfortable truths, preferring to sweep problems under the rug rather than address them directly. "Why rock the boat?" was her favorite phrase. "Some things are better left unsaid." Little did I know that this philosophy would soon enable the greatest betrayal our family would ever face, one that would ultimately cost my father his life and shatter everything we had built together. Thanksgiving was always a big event in the Thompson household. Mom would spend days polishing the silver that had been in her family for generations, arranging elaborate centerpieces with fall foliage and cooking Dad's favorite dishes. That year, I arrived home from my apartment across town the day before, planning to help with preparations and spend some quality time with my parents. The moment I walked through the door, I sensed something was different. The house looked the same, impeccable as always, but there was a strange energy in the air. Mom greeted me with her usual hug, but something about her appearance caught me off guard. Her honey blonde hair, which she had worn in the same elegant bob for as long as I could remember, was now highlighted with caramel streaks and styled in loose waves. She wore a fitted cashmere sweater and designer jeans I'd never seen before. "You look different, Mom," I said, studying her face. She appeared younger, somehow more vibrant. "Just trying something new?" she replied with an uncharacteristic giggle. "Your father barely noticed?" Speaking of Dad, he emerged from his study looking exhausted. The circles under his eyes had deepened, and his silver hair seemed thinner than I remembered. When I hugged him, I could feel his ribs more prominently through his sweater. "Everything okay, Dad? You look tired," I said, concern flooding through me. "Just a busy season at the hospital," he assured me with a weak smile. "Nothing to worry about." That night, as I helped Mom prepare the stuffing for the turkey, her phone kept buzzing with text messages. Each time, she would quickly check it and smile to herself. When I asked who was texting her so persistently, she waved dismissively. "Just Vivian from the charity committee," she said. "We're planning the winter fundraiser." Dinner the next day was tense in a way our family gatherings had never been. Mom kept checking her watch, and Dad seemed lost in thought, picking at his food rather than enjoying it. Allison, who had arrived that morning, remained oblivious, chattering about her boutique job and the latest fashion trends. After dinner, as Allison and I cleared the table, we overheard our parents in a heated whisper by the kitchen door. "Another late meeting, Kate, on Thanksgiving weekend." Dad's voice was strained. "The charity gala doesn't plan itself, David," Mom replied coolly. "Some of us still have ambitions." The barb hung in the air, sharp and cruel. Dad's face crumpled momentarily before he composed himself and walked away. Mom grabbed her coat and keys, claiming she needed to drop off some paperwork with the event planner. While loading the dishwasher, I accidentally knocked Mom's purse off the counter. As I picked up the scattered contents, a text notification illuminated her phone screen. "Missing you already. Last night was incredible. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Jay." My stomach twisted into a knot. This was definitely not a message from Vivian from the charity committee. When Mom returned 2 hours later, smelling faintly of unfamiliar cologne, I followed her upstairs. "I need to talk to you," I said, closing her bedroom door behind us. "Can it wait? I'm exhausted." She sighed, removing her earrings. "Are you having an affair?" The question burst from me, direct and unavoidable. Mom's face hardened, her eyes narrowing dangerously. "How dare you accuse me of something so vile, after everything I've sacrificed for this family?" "I saw a text on your phone," I pressed. "From Jay. It wasn't a friendly message, Mom." "You had no right to read my private messages," she snapped. "And you're misinterpreting things. James is a donor for the hospital charity. We've been working closely on the gala." "Closely enough that he comments on how incredible last night was." Her hand struck my cheek before I could react. We both froze, shocked. She had never hit me before. "You're trying to create problems where there aren't any," she hissed. "If you say anything to your father, you'll destroy this family. Is that what you want, Miranda?" Stunned, I retreated to my old bedroom, my cheeks still stinging. Later that night, I confided in Allison, hoping for support, or at least a sounding board. "You're overthinking things," she said, not looking up from her phone. "Mom has always been dedicated to her charity work. And even if something is going on, it's between her and Dad, not our business." Her dismissive attitude only strengthened my resolve to uncover the truth. I was worried about Dad. He looked unwell, his usual robust energy diminished. He had always been the picture of health, practicing what he preached to his patients about diet and exercise. To see him so depleted alarmed me. The next morning, I offered to drive Mom to the grocery store for some last-minute items. While she ran inside, I searched her car. In the glove compartment, I found a receipt from the Liberty Hotel dated the previous week and a small bottle of men's cologne. This wasn't charity work. This was a calculated deception. I decided to extend my stay through the weekend, claiming I needed a break from my research. On Saturday evening, Mom announced she had an emergency meeting with the event planner. Against my better judgment, I followed her. She drove to an upscale restaurant in Back Bay, where she met a tall, silver-haired man in an expensive suit. From my parked car across the street, I watched through the restaurant window as they greeted each other with a lingering kiss, their hands intertwined on the table. With shaking hands, I took photos with my phone, documenting the betrayal unfolding before my eyes. The man caressed her face in a gesture so intimate it made my stomach turn. This wasn't a new flirtation. This was an established relationship. As tears blurred my vision, I realized my mother had been leading a double life, and my father, the man who had devoted his life to saving others, was suffering in silence. The drive back to my apartment that night was a blur. Rain pounded against my windshield, matching the storm raging inside me. What was I supposed to do with this information? Tell my father and potentially devastate him? Confront my mother and give her a chance to end things before Dad found out? The weight of this knowledge crushed me. After a sleepless night, I decided my mother deserved one chance to do the right thing. I called and asked her to meet me at a coffee shop near my apartment, away from Dad and Allison. She arrived looking immaculate as always, not a hint of guilt on her perfectly made-up face. "I know about James," I said without preamble, sliding my phone across the table with the photos displayed. "And I know he's not just a donor." For a moment, her facade cracked. Shock registered in her eyes before they hardened to ice. "You followed me." Her voice was deadly quiet. "You invaded my privacy." "You're cheating on Dad," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "How long has this been going on?" To my surprise, she didn't deny it. A cold smile spread across her face. "James Whitman is a very successful real estate developer. He understands ambition, appreciates a woman with vision. He doesn't come home exhausted every night, too tired to even have a conversation. So this is Dad's fault because he works hard saving lives." "Your father chose his patience over me years ago," she said dismissively. "I've given this family 25 years of my life. Don't I deserve some happiness?" "How long?" I demanded again. She sipped her latte calmly. "We've been seeing each other for a little over a year." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. A year. While Dad was working himself to exhaustion, while I was proudly sharing my research with him, while we were having family dinners and holidays, Mom was betraying us all. "You have two choices," I said, fighting back tears. "End it with James and recommit to your marriage, or I tell Dad everything." Mom's eyes flashed with anger. "You wouldn't dare." "1 week," I stated firmly. "End it, or I'll tell him myself." What followed was the most heated argument we'd ever had. Mom accused me of being a self-righteous daddy's girl who never understood the sacrifices she'd made. I accused her of being selfish and cruel. We said terrible things to each other, drawing concerned glances from other cafe patrons. Finally, Mom's shoulders sagged. "Fine, I'll end it with James, but not because you're threatening me, because it's the right thing for the family." I wanted to believe her, but something in her too smooth acquiescence made me uneasy. Nevertheless, I returned to my apartment and my research, hoping she would keep her word. A week passed and I heard nothing from either of my parents. I assumed no news was good news and threw myself back into my work. Then came the call that would change everything. My phone rang at 2:17 a.m. It was Allison, her voice broken by sobs. "Miranda, it's Dad. He's had a heart attack. We're at Mass General. It's bad. You need to come now." I drove through empty streets on autopilot, my mind racing with possibilities. Dad had no history of heart disease. He exercised regularly, ate well. This didn't make sense. When I arrived at the ICU, I found Allison slumped in a waiting room chair, her makeup streaked down her face. Mom sat apart from her, surprisingly composed, staring blankly at the wall. "What happened?" I demanded. "He collapsed in his study," Allison explained between sobs. "Mom found him and called 911. I looked at my mother suspiciously. "When?" "Around midnight," she replied, not meeting my eyes. A doctor I recognized as one of Dad's colleagues approached us, his face grave. "Mrs. Thompson, girls, David has suffered a massive myocardial infarction. We've stabilized him for now, but the next 48 hours will be critical." "Can we see him?" I asked. "Briefly. He's sedated but somewhat responsive." In the ICU, Dad looked small and frail among the tangle of tubes and wires. His skin had a grayish tinge that terrified me. I took his hand, gently mindful of the IV. "Dad, it's Miranda. You're going to be okay. You have the best doctors taking care of you." His eyelids fluttered and he squeezed my hand weakly. "Miranda," he whispered. "Need to tell you. Don't try to talk, Dad. Save your strength." He shook his head stubbornly. "Sarah Whitman called me. Told me everything. About Kate and James." My blood ran cold. Sarah Whitman must be James's wife. She had discovered the affair and told my father. The timing couldn't be coincidental. When did she call you?" "Yesterday afternoon. He managed before a coughing fit overtook him." I stepped out of the room to confront my mother. "Sarah Whitman told Dad about the affair. Yesterday. You didn't end it, did you?" Mom had the decency to look ashamed, but only briefly. "I was going to. But then James and I decided we should be honest about our feelings. I was planning to tell your father this weekend." "Well, Sarah Whitman beat you to it, and now Dad is fighting for his life." I was nearly shouting, drawing stares from the hospital staff. Over the next 48 hours, we maintained a vigil at Dad's bedside. His condition deteriorated steadily despite the best efforts of his colleagues. Multiple organ systems began to fail. I consulted with his doctors, reviewed his charts, and realized with growing horror that the massive cardiac event had caused too much damage. He wasn't going to recover. On the second night, during a rare moment when we were alone, Dad beckoned me closer. "Miranda," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Promise me something." "Anything, Dad." "Forgiveness. It's the only way forward. For all of you." "Dad, please save your strength. We'll have plenty of time to talk when you're better." He squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "No time. Remember, I love you. Always have. Always will." Those were the last coherent words he spoke to me. By morning, he was on a ventilator. By afternoon, the doctors were discussing brain function and quality of life. By evening, we were making the impossible decision to withdraw life support. David Thompson, beloved father, husband, and healer, died at 8:43 p.m. on a Tuesday evening. He was 59 years old. Throughout this nightmare, I couldn't help but notice my mother's strange, disconnected behavior. She went through the emotions of a grieving widow, accepting condolences with appropriate solemnity. But there was something mechanical about her responses. She never cried, not once, and she kept checking her phone when she thought no one was looking. As we left the hospital that final time, a terrible suspicion took root in my heart. The shock of discovering his wife's betrayal had literally broken my father's heart. His death wasn't just a tragedy, it was the direct result of my mother's selfish choices. And from the look on her face, I wasn't sure she even realized what she had done. The days following Dad's death passed in a fog of grief and disbelief. As the older daughter and the one who shared Dad's profession, I took charge of the funeral arrangements. Mom seemed strangely detached, offering minimal input and spending hours on her phone in hushed conversations. Allison, through her tears, became unusually protective of our mother, running interference whenever I tried to have a private conversation with her. 3 days after Dad died, I was searching through his desk for his life insurance policy when I found a file with funeral instructions. Always organized and thoughtful, he had outlined his wishes clearly: a simple service at our family church, donations to the American Heart Association in lieu of flowers, and specific music selections, including "What a Wonderful World," which he'd danced to with Mom at their wedding. That same evening, while helping Mom sort through paperwork in the kitchen, her phone lit up with a text message. She had stepped away momentarily, and I couldn't help but see the preview. "Missing you terribly. Can we meet tonight? Need to hold you through this. Jay." Rage boiled up inside me. Dad wasn't even buried yet, and James was still in the picture. I confronted Mom when she returned. "You're still seeing him. Dad isn't even in the ground yet," I shouted, beyond caring about decorum. Mom's face hardened. "Miranda, you don't understand what I'm going through." "What you're going through? Dad is dead because of your affair." "That's not fair," she hissed. "Your father had a weak heart. His doctors warned him years ago to reduce his stress levels." "The stress of discovering his wife was cheating on him is what killed him. How can you not see that?" "I never meant for him to find out that way," she said, looking genuinely distressed for the first time. "Sarah Whitman had no right to call him." "And you had no right to betray him," I countered. "Are you ending things with James now?" A long silence followed, and when Mom finally spoke, her words shattered what little remained of my world. "James and I love each other, Miranda. We're going to be together." The funeral was a somber affair. The church overflowed with Dad's patients, colleagues, and friends. I delivered a heartfelt eulogy highlighting his dedication to medicine, his gentle humor, and his unwavering love for his family. Throughout the service, Mom played the part of the grieving widow, perfectly dabbing at dry eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief, accepting condolences with a practiced, sorrowful expression. But I knew it was an act, a performance for the community that had respected the Thompson family for decades. The true horror came at the memorial reception held at our family home. As guests mingled in the living room sharing stories about Dad, I spotted a tall, distinguished-looking man entering through the front door. Even from across the room, I recognized James Whitman from my surveillance photos. The audacity of his presence at my father's memorial made me physically ill. More shocking still was watching my mother discreetly squeeze his hand as he offered his condolences. I observed them from across the room, noting their furtive glances and the inappropriate intimacy in their brief interactions. At one point, I overheard them whispering behind a floral arrangement. "We'll have to wait a respectable amount of time," Mom was saying. "At least a month." "Whatever you think is best, Kate," James replied. "I just can't wait to start our life together." I fled to the bathroom, retching into the toilet. When I emerged, Allison was waiting for me, concern etched on her face. "What's wrong? You look terrible." "James Whitman is here," I said, "and Mom invited him." Allison's expression shifted from concern to defensive anger. "So what if she did? She needs support right now." "Support? From the man she cheated with, the affair that killed Dad." "You don't know that's what caused his heart attack," Allison snapped. "And Mom deserves happiness." "Dad deserved loyalty," I countered, stunned by my sister's attitude. The breaking point came 3 days after the funeral. I arrived at the family home to find workers removing Dad's belongings from his study. Books, medical journals, family photos, all being packed into cardboard boxes. "What's happening?" I demanded. Mom emerged from the kitchen looking uncomfortable. "Miranda, we need to talk." She led me to the living room, where, to my shock, James Whitman sat comfortably on our family sofa, a glass of Dad's favorite scotch in his hand. "What is he doing here?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "James is moving in," Mom stated flatly, "and we're getting married." The room seemed to tilt around me. "When?" "This weekend," she replied. "A small civil ceremony." 10 days after Dad's death, Are you insane? I've lost too many years already, she said defensively. We're not getting any younger. And his kids will be staying here on weekends, Allison added, entering the room. They're really nice, Miranda. Jason is in pre-law and Sophia is studying fashion like me. I stared at my sister in disbelief. You've met his children? You're okay with this? Life goes on, Allison said with a shrug that made me want to shake her. Mom deserves a fresh start. I turned to James, who had the decency to look uncomfortable. You're moving into my father's house, sleeping in his bed, drinking his scotch. Have you no shame? Kate and I didn't plan for things to happen this way, he said smoothly. But when you find love at our age, you don't waste time. If Mom goes through with this, I'm done, I stated, my voice shaking with rage. I will never set foot in this house again. Mom's expression turned cold. You're overreacting as usual. We're still a family. No, I said, looking around at the home where I'd grown up, already being transformed by this interloper. We're not. I rushed upstairs to Dad's closet, determined to rescue his personal items before they could be discarded. His favorite sweater still smelled like him, a mix of his cologne and the peppermints he always carried for nervous patients. I filled several boxes with his clothes, his watch collection, photo albums, and the journals he'd kept throughout his career. As I carried the last box to my car, I took one final look at my childhood home. Through the window, I could see Mom, Allison, James, and two young adults I assumed were his children, sitting around our dining table laughing as if they'd been family for years, not minutes. My father's presence had been erased with breathtaking speed, replaced by the very man whose affair with my mother had caused his death. I drove away with tears blinding me, knowing I would never return to the house filled with so many memories now tainted beyond redemption. The weeks following my dramatic exit from the family home were the darkest of my life. I retreated to my apartment, took a leave of absence from my research position, and essentially became a hermit. The dual trauma of losing my father and watching my mother's breathtaking betrayal left me paralyzed with grief and rage. Allison called daily at first, leaving increasingly irritated voicemails when I didn't answer. You're being melodramatic, Miranda. Mom is happy. Isn't that what matters? James is actually really nice if you'd give him a chance. His kids and I get along great. Dad wouldn't want us divided like this. He told you to forgive, remember? Her calls only deepened my isolation. How could she not see the horror of what was happening? How could she so easily welcome these strangers into our family home while Dad's memory was still fresh? 3 weeks after Dad's death, the wedding announcement appeared in the Boston Globe. Catherine Thompson and James Whitman united in marriage in an intimate ceremony. The announcement mentioned that Catherine was the widow of the late Dr. David Thompson, as if his death was a minor biographical detail, not a recent devastating loss. The community reaction was mixed. Dad's colleagues at the hospital expressed their shock and disappointment to me when I finally returned to work. Many of their wives stopped inviting Mom to social events, but others, particularly those in Mom's charity circles, seemed to accept the narrative she was spinning that she and James had reconnected as old friends after Dad's death and found comfort in each other's arms. It was a convenient fiction that erased their year-long affair and its fatal consequences. I spent hours sorting through the boxes of Dad's belongings I'd rescued from the house. Among them, I discovered his personal journal, which he'd kept sporadically over the years. The entries from the past 6 months told a heartbreaking story of increasing suspicions, sleepless nights, and physical symptoms. Kate came home smelling of unfamiliar cologne again. One entry read, "When questioned, she became defensive and accused me of spying on her. My chest has been tight all evening." Another entry dated just 2 weeks before his heart attack. "Found credit card statements showing dinners and hotel charges I know nothing about. Confronted Kate, who claimed they were for charity events. The pain in my left arm returned tonight. Taking an extra aspirin." Most damning was the final entry dated the day of his heart attack. "Sarah Whitman called today. Confirmed what I've suspected for months. Kate and James have been having an affair for over a year. Meeting Kate tonight to discuss. Chest pain severe. Should see a doctor but need to resolve this first." The journal provided irrefutable evidence that the stress of Mom's betrayal had exacerbated Dad's underlying heart condition. He had been experiencing warning signs for months as he grew suspicious, culminating in the massive heart attack that took his life. Armed with this evidence, I drove to the family home determined to make Mom acknowledge her role in Dad's death. I hadn't been back since the day I'd left with Dad's belongings, and the changes shocked me. The house had been redecorated in a modern style that erased the traditional aesthetic Dad had loved. Family photos had been replaced with abstract art. Even the mailbox now read, Whitman Thompson. Mom answered the door wearing designer clothes I didn't recognize, looking younger and more vibrant than she had in years. For a moment, we just stared at each other across the threshold of what no longer felt like my childhood home. "Miranda," she said finally, "this is unexpected." "I found Dad's journal," I said without preamble, holding up the leather-bound book. "He documented everything, Mom. The suspicious charges, your late nights, the cologne. He was having cardiac symptoms for months as he suspected your affair. The call from Sarah Whitman was just the final blow." Mom's face hardened. "Your father always had a weak heart. His own lifestyle choices caused his condition. He was the picture of health until he started suspecting you were cheating," I shouted, beyond caring about the neighbors who might hear. "His last journal entry was the day he died, after Sarah Whitman called him." "I didn't ask her to make that call," Mom said defensively. "But you caused the situation that led to it. You and James destroyed this family, and now you're playing house in the home Dad worked his entire life to provide." Mom crossed her arms. "I've moved on, Miranda. Perhaps it's time you did too." "Moved on? It's been a month. Dad is barely cold in his grave." James appeared behind Mom, resting a proprietary hand on her shoulder. "I think you should leave, Miranda. You're upsetting your mother." "She's not my mother anymore," I said coldly. "And you're sleeping in a dead man's bed that you helped put him in." I left the journal on the doorstep and drove away, severing the last thread of hope that Mom might ever acknowledge her role in the tragedy or show genuine remorse. The following months were a lonely time. I resumed my research work, finding solace in continuing Dad's legacy of cardiac care. Most weekends were spent alone in my apartment, surrounded by Dad's belongings, the tangible reminders of the man who had shaped my life and values. The first Thanksgiving after Dad's death, I received a text from Allison. "Family dinner at 3. James's kids will be here too. Mom says you're welcome if you can behave civilly." I didn't respond. The idea of sitting at our family table with James and his children, pretending we were one big, happy, blended family, made me physically ill. Instead, I volunteered at a homeless shelter, serving meals to people who had lost far more than I had. Christmas brought a similar invitation, equally ignored. On Christmas Eve, I sat alone in my apartment watching old family videos where Dad's laugh rang out as he opened presents or admired the tree. The contrast between those joyful memories and my current solitude was almost unbearable. After 6 months of minimal contact, Allison appeared at my apartment door unannounced. She looked different, more polished, wearing clothes I recognized as being more expensive than she could afford on her boutique salary. "We need to talk," she said, pushing past me into the apartment. "This has gone on long enough." "What has?" "Your self-imposed exile, your refusal to accept Mom's new marriage." I laughed bitterly. "There's nothing to accept. She betrayed Dad, it led to his death, and she replaced him before he was even buried." Allison sighed dramatically. "Mom and James have transformed the house. You wouldn't recognize it. They've turned Dad's home office into headquarters for their new interior design business. They're so happy, Miranda." The casual mention of Dad's sacred space being repurposed for Mom and James's business venture felt like a knife to my heart. "Good for them," I said coldly. "What does any of this have to do with me?" "Family is family," Allison insisted. "James has been so generous. He's paying my tuition for graduate school in fashion merchandising. His daughter Sophia and I are starting a style blog together." The pieces clicked together. Allison's new clothes, her graduate school plans, she couldn't previously afford her sudden closeness with James's daughter. She had been bought her loyalty, purchased with material comforts and opportunities. "So that's the price of your loyalty?" I asked quietly. A new wardrobe and tuition. Her face flushed with anger. That's not fair. James is just being supportive of his new family. He's not family. He's the man who helped destroy ours. Allison left in a huff, and we didn't speak again for weeks. During that time, I made a discovery that would transform my understanding of the events surrounding Dad's death. Through a chance meeting with one of James's business associates at a hospital fundraiser, I obtained the contact information for his ex-wife, Sarah Whitman. Curious about the woman who had made the fateful call to my father, I arranged to meet her for coffee. Sarah was an elegant woman in her early 50s with a dignified bearing that spoke of old money and proper upbringing. She greeted me with compassion in her eyes. "I've wanted to reach out to you for months," she said, "to explain and apologize." Over the next hour, she revealed a pattern of infidelity throughout her 20-year marriage to James. "He has a type," she explained. "Accomplished women who've put their careers on hold for family. He makes them feel seen again, valuable. Your mother wasn't his first affair, and I doubt she'll be his last." More shocking was her revelation that James had been pursuing Mom for years before she finally gave in. He met her at a hospital fundraiser 3 years ago. He told me he found her intriguing. I recognized the look in his eyes. It was the same way he looked at his administrative assistant before their affair and his yoga instructor before that. The timeline disturbed me deeply. Had Mom's affair been going on even longer than she admitted? Had Dad been suffering silently for years, not months? My suspicions were confirmed a week later when I ran into Dr. Alan Reynolds, Dad's closest colleague at the hospital cafeteria. When I mentioned my concerns about the timeline of Mom's affair, his face grew troubled. "There's something you should know, Miranda," he said hesitantly. "Your mother came to your father's office the day he had his heart attack, around noon. They had a heated discussion behind closed doors. When she left, he canceled his afternoon appointments, something he never did." This new information sent me reeling. Mom had been at the hospital the day Dad died before his heart attack. She had never mentioned this visit to anyone. I confronted her that evening, showing up at the house unannounced. Mom answered the door in loungewear, clearly not expecting visitors. "Dr. Reynolds told me you visited Dad at the hospital the day he died," I said without preamble. "What did you discuss?" For once, Mom's perfect composure cracked. "That's none of your business." "It became my business when Dad died and you married his replacement 10 days later. What did you tell him?" After a tense standoff, she finally sighed. "Fine. After Sarah called him, your father demanded to meet. I went to his office. He was upset, naturally. And I told him the truth, that James and I were in love, that I wanted a divorce, that I was tired of living in the shadow of his career and his perfect daughter." The casual cruelty of her words stunned me. "You told a man with a heart condition that you were leaving him for another man hours before he had a massive heart attack, and you don't see the connection." "That's not fair," she protested. "How was I to know he would react so dramatically?" "Dramatically? He died, Mom. He died because the woman he loved for 30 years told him she was leaving him for another man. The doctors said it was an underlying condition," she argued weakly, "triggered by extreme emotional distress," I finished, "which you caused." Our argument attracted attention from neighbors. James appeared at the door, placing a protective arm around Mom's shoulders. Behind him, I could see Allison and 2 young adults I assumed were James's children, watching wide-eyed from the living room. "I think you should leave," James said firmly. "Gladly," I replied. "But first you should know that Sarah told me all about your pattern of affairs. Mom wasn't the first married woman you pursued, and she won't be the last. Enjoy your ill-gotten gains while they last." As I turned to leave, Allison rushed out. "Why can't you just let everyone be happy?" she cried. "Why do you have to keep dredging up the past?" "Because the past matters," I said simply. "Dad matters." That night, I received a group text from extended family members orchestrated by Allison, urging me to reconcile with Mom for the sake of family unity. "Life is too short for grudges," wrote our Aunt Patricia. "Your father wouldn't want this division," added Uncle Robert. None of them knew the full story. None of them had read Dad's journal or understood the direct line between Mom's betrayal and his death. They saw only a widow who had found new love, albeit unusually quickly, and a daughter too stubborn to accept change. I responded simply, "I will not pretend that what happened is acceptable. Dad deserved better, and I will honor his memory by standing firm." In the midst of this family drama, I found unexpected support from Dad's medical colleagues and longtime patients who understood the man he was and respected my loyalty to his memory. Dr. Reynolds helped me establish a research grant in Dad's name for preventative cardiology. Several of his patients shared stories with me about his exceptional care that brought me to tears, but also comforted me immensely. Meanwhile, I learned that Mom had leveraged her position as Dad's widow to gain control of all family assets, including the vacation cabin in Maine that Dad had loved so dearly. When I received notice that she and James were selling it to finance their new business venture, I made a desperate bid to purchase it myself, hoping to preserve this one piece of Dad's legacy. My offer was rejected in favor of a higher bid from a developer who planned to tear it down and build luxury condos. The final message from Allison came 6 months after Dad's death. "Mom and James are hosting a family reunion next month. Everyone will be there. This is your last chance to be part of this family, Miranda. The rest of us have moved on. Dad wouldn't want you to be alone like this." Her words confirmed what I had suspected for months. In their eyes, I was the problem. My loyalty to Dad's memory, my refusal to accept their rewritten narrative, my insistence on acknowledging the ugly truth, all made me an inconvenient reminder of what had really happened. It was easier to label me as unforgiving than to face their own complicity in erasing Dad's place in our family. That night, I made the most difficult decision of my life. I would leave Boston, the only home I'd ever known, and start fresh somewhere new. Somewhere I could honor Dad's memory without the constant pain of seeing my former family moving on as if he had never existed. As I packed up my apartment and prepared for this new chapter, I took one final drive past our family home. Through the window, I could see Mom, James, Allison, and James's children gathered in the living room, laughing together like the perfect family they pretended to be. The sight no longer hurt as it once had. Instead, I felt a strange sense of peace, knowing I was making the right choice for my own healing. The next day, I accepted a prestigious research position at Seattle Grace Hospital, 3,000 miles away from the ruins of what had once been my family. Seattle welcomed me with its misty landscapes and coffee-scented air so different from the familiar streets of Boston. My apartment overlooking Puget Sound became a sanctuary decorated with carefully chosen photographs of Dad and mementos from our time together, including his favorite fishing rod from our cabin trips to Maine. The first months were achingly lonely. I threw myself into my research, working long hours in the lab, developing new protocols for early cardiac intervention. Colleagues respected my work ethic, but kept their distance from the intense, solitary newcomer who rarely joined them for after-work drinks or weekend outings. At my lowest point, I found myself sitting alone on a bench at Cary Park, staring out at the Space Needle as rain soaked through my jacket. A woman sat down beside me, seemingly unbothered by the downpour, and offered me half her umbrella. "First year in Seattle," she asked kindly. "Is it that obvious?" She laughed. "Locals don't use umbrellas. We just get wet and deal with it." Her name was Diana, and she ran a grief support group specifically for people dealing with family estrangement and betrayal. "It's a different kind of grief," she explained. "When you lose someone to death, people bring casseroles and offer condolences. When you lose someone to estrangement or betrayal, people often blame you for not getting over it or keeping the peace." At her invitation, I attended my first support group the following Thursday. Sitting in a circle with strangers who had experienced similar family fractures, I finally found people who understood the complexity of my situation without judgment. There was Robert, whose wife had emptied their bank accounts and disappeared with their children. Maria, whose parents had chosen her abuser over her. Thomas, whose siblings had manipulated their elderly father into changing his will. For the first time since Dad's death, I could speak freely about what had happened, about the devastating speed with which Mom had replaced Dad with James, about Allison's bewildering alliance with our mother, about the family pressure to move on and pretend everything was normal. "You're not crazy for feeling betrayed," Diana assured me, "and you're not wrong for maintaining your boundaries." Slowly, I began to rebuild my life. I established new routines, finding comfort in small rituals. Sunday mornings at a local bookstore that reminded me of Dad's love of reading. Volunteering at a free cardiac clinic in a low-income neighborhood, honoring his commitment to accessible health care. Weekly hikes in the mountains that surrounded the city, drawing strength from nature's constancy when human relationships had proved so fragile. 6 months into my Seattle life, I received an unexpected email from someone named Sophia Whitman. It took me a moment to place the name James's daughter, the one Allison had become so close with. "You don't know me," she wrote, "but I feel like I know you through the stories my father and your mother tell. I want to apologize for my father's role in the pain your family has experienced. I've seen this pattern before with my mother and now with Catherine. Please know that not all of us are blind to what happened." The email touched me deeply. I had assumed James's children were as complicit in the situation as Allison, but Sophia's message revealed a more nuanced reality. We began a cautious correspondence, and through her I gained occasional insights into the family I had left behind. Mom and James had indeed started an interior design business, capitalizing on her eye for aesthetics and his business connections. They were successful by all external measures, but Sophia hinted at growing tensions in their marriage. James worked late often, and Mom had begun questioning his close relationship with their much younger office manager. Karma, it seemed, had its own timeline. Around the same time, I reconnected with Dad's sister, Aunt Eleanor, who had always been somewhat estranged from our immediate family due to a long-ago disagreement with Mom. She reached out after hearing about my move to Seattle, and we discovered a shared commitment to preserving Dad's memory. She shared family stories and photographs I had never seen, including images of Dad as a young medical student, his face alight with the same passion for healing that had defined his entire life. "David always saw the best in people," Eleanor told me during one of our long phone calls. "Including your mother. Sometimes I think he saw what he wanted to see rather than what was really there." Those conversations helped me understand that Dad's blindness to Mom's discontent wasn't naivety, but a choice to believe in the goodness of the woman he loved. It made his betrayal no less painful, but added a layer of poignancy to my understanding of their marriage. 9 months after my move, I received a text from an unknown number that turned out to be Allison. "Mom and James are having problems. She found receipts for jewelry she never received. Sound familiar? Maybe you were right about him." I didn't respond. The validation offered no satisfaction, only a weary sense that patterns were repeating themselves. Mom had become the betrayed spouse, experiencing a fraction of what she had put Dad through. It seemed a hollow form of justice. 2 weeks later, Allison called. After months of silence, hearing her voice was jarring. She sounded different, subdued. "James is having an affair with his assistant," she said without preamble. "Mom is devastated. She's talking about divorce." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, surprised to find I meant it. Despite everything, I took no joy in Mom's pain. "You were right," Allison admitted, her voice breaking. "About James, about the pattern. Sarah Whitman tried to warn Mom too, but she wouldn't listen. None of us would listen." "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I miss you," she said simply. "And because I've been thinking a lot about Dad lately. About how we all just moved on so quickly after he died. How we let his memory fade away. It wasn't right." It was the first acknowledgement from anyone in the family that our handling of Dad's death had been wrong. Not a full admission of the betrayal that preceded it, but a start. "I've been going through some of Dad's old things," Allison continued. "I found letters he wrote to me when I was at fashion school in New York. He was so supportive, Miranda. So genuinely interested in my dreams, even though they were so different from his world. I didn't appreciate that enough when he was alive." Her words touched a tender place in my heart. "He was proud of both of us. in different ways. I know that now, she said quietly. It took losing you to realize what we all lost when he died. That conversation marked the beginning of a careful rapprochement with Allison. We weren't close as we once had been, but we established a fragile connection primarily through emails and occasional phone calls. She remained in Boston, working now as a buyer for an upscale department store, maintaining a relationship with Mom, but with clearer boundaries than before. Mom and James did indeed divorce almost exactly 2 years after Dad's death. According to Allison, the settlement left Mom financially secure, but emotionally shattered. She had experienced firsthand the betrayal she had inflicted on Dad, though with less devastating consequences. Several months later, Mom reached out directly for the first time since our final confrontation. Her email was brief. I've been in therapy since James left. My counselor suggested I make amends where possible. I know words can never undo what happened, but I want you to know I am truly sorry for the pain I caused. Your father deserved better. So did you. If you're ever ready to talk, I'm here. I read the message several times, searching for the manipulative undertones I had come to expect from her communications. Finding none, I saved the email but didn't respond immediately. Some wounds needed more time to heal. Meanwhile, I continued building my new life in Seattle. My research gained recognition in the cardiac community, resulting in a significant grant to expand our preventative care program. I established a memorial fund in Dad's name that provided cardiac screenings to low-income patients. I even began dating again, cautiously opening my heart to Jack, a kind pediatric surgeon who understood professional dedication, but also valued work-life balance in a way that honored relationships. On the 3rd anniversary of Dad's death, I finally did something I had been planning for months. I used some of my research prize money to purchase a small cottage on Whidbey Island, reminiscent of our family cabin in Maine. There, I planted a memorial garden filled with Dad's favorite flowers and trees, a living tribute to the man whose values continued to guide my life. As I knelt in the soil planting blue hydrangeas that matched the color of Dad's eyes, I reflected on the journey of the past 3 years. The devastating loss, the bewildering betrayal, the painful isolation, and ultimately the rebuilding of a life with new connections and purpose. Dad's final words to me had been about forgiveness. For years I had struggled to understand what he meant. Did he want me to forgive Mom for her affair? To forget the chain of events that led to his death? To welcome James into the family he had helped destroy? Now, with the perspective of time and distance, I understood that forgiveness wasn't about excusing actions or pretending harm hadn't occurred. It was about refusing to let bitterness consume me, about finding a way forward that honored truth while allowing for healing. I had not forgiven in the sense of welcoming Mom and Allison back into my life as if nothing had happened. But I had forgiven myself for walking away from a family situation that had become toxic. I had forgiven Dad for his human blindness to Mom's discontent. And in some ways, I had forgiven Mom and Allison for being unable to see the depth of their betrayal, for being human and flawed in ways that caused immense pain. That forgiveness didn't require reconciliation or forgetting. It simply meant I was no longer defined by what had happened to our family. I had built something new from the ashes, something that honored Dad's memory while creating space for new connections and experiences. 3 years after cutting ties with my mother, I had finally found peace. Not through family reconciliation, but through the difficult work of grieving, establishing boundaries, and rebuilding. I carried Dad's legacy forward, not through bitterness about how he died, but through living according to the values that had defined his life: compassion, integrity, and dedication to helping others. As the sun set over the Puget Sound, painting the sky in watercolor hues of pink and gold, I felt Dad's presence more strongly than I had in years. Not as a ghost haunting me with unfinished business, but as an abiding influence, a voice of wisdom and love that transcended betrayal and even death itself. I had lost my family of origin, but I had found something equally valuable: the freedom to create a chosen family based on mutual respect and shared values rather than merely shared DNA. That was a legacy Dad would have been proud of. Have you ever had to cut ties with family members for your own well-being? Sometimes walking away is the bravest choice we can make, even when others don't understand. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more journeys of healing after family betrayal. Share your own experiences in the comments, and remember that creating boundaries isn't selfish, it's self-preservation. Thank you for walking this path with me today, and remember that sometimes our greatest strength comes from choosing who deserves a place in our lives regardless of blood ties.